Hello and welcome everybody to episode 65 of the 6 Pixels Under podcast. I am NS, or Nerdslayer, your host, and we have a lot of MMO news to catch up on today. Before we get to that though, I figured, why not start without the hat? That way I can dramatically put the hat on. Right? Sorry for those who are just listening, you don't get the full experience, but how's everybody doing on this 6th of January, Monday? It's the first Monday of the month and the second week of the month. We have at least 8 articles to get to today. There's been a bunch of new developments about some soon to, or supposed to be soon to launch MMOs. Crowfall has some news come out. New World had some news come out. More news, I should say. Camelot Unchained is supposed to reveal some big, massive experience this month. Ashes of Creation had a creative director's letter. And yeah, so lots of MMO stuff to react to, lots of MMO stuff to talk about. But the thing that I'll probably start off first with is going over an article I found interesting on massivelyop.com, which talks about the NCSoft situation with City of Heroes. Apparently, NCSoft just recently filed another copyright, or rather, filed another fresh trademark, which might be even worse, I should say. And yeah, so we'll react to that as well. First podcast of 2020? Yeah, I guess it is. I didn't even think about that. Good point. Hey, what's up, Carlo? Good to see you guys. Semper Pi Delis. Every hole's a goal. Akahara. Card, thank you for the sub, by the way. Tip. I want to say first at the top, congratulations to BlackRuins. BlackRuins was just promoted to full rank of detective, which means now him and Limpos are the only ones that are sharing that rank. If you guys are wondering what the ranks are, they're mostly for flavor, but it also shows people in our community who are the more dedicated members and who are the more let's say members who are willing to actually engage in conversation. The point of the system, Card's idea essentially was to bring back some of the old school MMO forum kind of warfare, if that makes sense. Back in the days, we had forums on basically every single MMO, and on these forums you had lots of great discussion, debates, arguments, you name it. You could talk about the game, you could talk about other games, and of course there was other forums that weren't just game specific. There was just mmorpg.com, which still exists, but it's just not as big as it was before. Forum wise, I was a big forumer, as you guys know about me. If you don't know, well, now you know. And we kind of had that idea. Card brought up having ranks, and ranks allow you to have a little bit of quality control. So if you're wondering how you can get on the podcast to join the MMO roundtable, you have to at least be a rank of junior detective. And I'm sure Card will correct me if I say anything wrong. But you need at least a junior detective rank, which just basically means that you've joined the Discord, you're not only social and active, but you're also engaging in conversations, creating discussion, and so on and so forth, which is a big part of our community if you guys are new here. One thing that's unique about our community is that we're always willing to engage and have discussions about things, even when they're controversial, even when maybe we've got to go through the weeds a little bit, and especially even when we have to disagree with each other, because life isn't everything but, sometimes disagreeing, right? I'm actually an AI, so the question is true in regards to if I can be considered alive. Also, yeah, some ranks in Discord give special Discord area access. So you get access to field work, for example. If you want to help me more hands-on with my videos, you can kind of give me links that you think are interesting in regards to maybe the game I'm working on currently, which is, as you guys know, since it was announced already, my next Death of a Game is going to be on Gearbox's... why am I blanking out on the name right now? Battleborn. I don't know why I wanted to call it Battleforge. What is Battleforge? Why does Battleforge sound familiar? I'm gonna Google what Battleforge is. I don't know why Battleforge was coming up in my head. Apparently, Battleforge is an RTS by EA. Huh. Interesting. Huh. I don't know why I was thinking Battleforge. Hilarious. Yeah, Gearbox is Battleborn, which, I mean, at this point, there's so much that's been said already about the game. But obviously, I don't really necessarily like to think about how other people have handled the stories. I just like to think of, I choose a game, and once I choose a game, in this case, a game that has been pretty much maligned since its inception. I mean, it's Battleborn since its inception has had a lot of hoopla about it, a lot of drama. People suggesting that it's a clone, people suggesting that it's an inferior version of a game, and even, you know, things that are as far as saying that it was a failure because it tried to go head to head with Overwatch, and so therefore it was an Overwatch clone. There's lots of different criticisms about Battleborn, and certainly probably a lot of reasons as to why it failed, besides just being a clone or looking or seeming like it's similar to Overwatch because it's also a hero shooter. For example, Battleborn had a single player campaign, which I'm not sure if many people knew that. I barely even knew that recently. So yeah, we'll talk more about that though some other time, and if you're wondering how you can assist on things like that, that's how. Just like Overwatch is a clone of TF2. Hate monger of the toxic brood. What a name, man. What a name. You still hitting up War? I don't even remember the last time I played Warhammer. So a thing that you guys have to realize about me is, like, when I play old school MMOs, unless I have like a community drive to play those with me, like if it's just me, I get bored almost instantaneously. I don't really find MMOs fun to play by myself. And old school MMOs are ones that I've experienced already, in the case of Warhammer, for example, for thousands of hours. So it's like, if I'm playing by myself in a game like Warhammer, I don't really have much enjoyment in it because I already did that for... At this point, I wish I could figure out how many hours I put into the game, but it has to be at least like 1,200 hours because I had at least 6 level 40s, 2 of which were over 50 renown. So like, if you just do the math there, that's already like 1,000 hours. Isn't an AI an animated corpse? Think about it. You have a bunch of sand and metal put together and then animated by electricity. Oh, there's one more area on Discord, which so far no one's unlocked. That's true. I forgot all about that, actually. Being blinding to play was an issue. Oh, you mean Battleborn? Yeah, Battleborn's UI was certainly probably the biggest thing that just jumps out to you when you played the game initially, right? Or just, I think it might still be like that, but I don't know if they fixed it since. But it's free to play on Steam, I'm pretty sure. So make sure to give it a try if you guys are curious about it. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into the first topic. I will say at the top, though, we have an MMO roundtable topic today, and that topic is simply about, what is your opinion of server types? Do you like or dislike server types? Do you prefer a mega server, which maybe has one rule set, over specific rule set servers? And then in, for explanation, I said specific rule set servers could be PvE, PvP, or roleplay servers. And a mega server is essentially just one large server where all people who play the game share that server. We'll get to the MMO roundtable, of course, later on in the podcast. So we'll put that on standby for now. Let's get into our first topic, though, that I wanted to go over, which is just something that I found interesting. Oh, they don't even let you download it anymore? Damn, that sucks, man. I thought they were, last time I checked Steam, it was still able to be downloaded for free. So now they've legit pulled down the game and they're only letting people who've downloaded it previously play it? Ouch. Alright, so NCSoft follows up on City of Heroes code copyright filing with a fresh trademark application. So if you guys have been following the whole City of Heroes homecoming thing, all of a sudden there is this server code that had existed for a while, secretly, in secret, that was an emulator of sorts. The game was running on a community private server, and for some time now the floodgates have been opened. There's multiple rogue servers that currently are in existence and operate, and you can play City of Heroes on those. But NCSoft has always had a bit of a hostile perspective on City of Heroes and sharing its IP. To talk a little bit about the inception of that relationship, when City of Heroes was shut down, it was still being profitable. It was still successful as a game, and it still had a population of, I think, between 200 to 400,000 players. So when when NCSoft killed that game, it was a pretty big blow for a lot of people, especially because once the arguments and financials started to come out, people realized, wait a minute, you guys were still making money. We realized, if you guys have been following my podcast now, that doesn't really matter for NCSoft. They don't care if they make money. They care if they make enough money, right? So it's not just, do we make money? It's, do we make enough money based on whatever projections we have? So after this news came out where the server code was basically kind of leaked all over the place and rogue servers were popping up all over the place, of course, there was the natural fear that, what if NCSoft just shuts it down? Right? What if NCSoft sends a cease and desist and tells all these rogue servers to shut down? It's very possible, right? And so the I believe the most prominent of these servers, I might say it here, the name of the people. I didn't want to. I can't remember. I guess the Homecoming Group is what they call it. The Homecoming Group has been working, with NCSoft concerning this problem of cease and desist, or I should say the legality of running a rogue server. If you're wondering why I'm doing my quotations for those who can't watch, it's because I've seen this said multiple times before with multiple other games. A lot of the time, these community-run servers will say that they're in negotiations with the big company or publisher, but it doesn't really work like that. You don't just call up NCSoft and say, hey guys, how are you doing? Is it cool if we run our server? It doesn't really work like that. So you're probably talking through 3 to 4 different proxies. And on top of that, even if you are talking to them, nothing has come from this. This has been said with City of Heroes before. This has been said with other games before, where they're trying to actually bring the game back rather, and contacting NCSoft about even buying the IP hasn't been successful before. And so now that these talks have supposedly been happening, people have been feeling pretty positive about it. For example, the writer in question who wrote this article on Massively OP, Bree Royce, stated that, it says right here, looking for the specific quote. Let's see. I'm trying to find exactly where the statement was said. But basically, okay, it says NCSoft, Reddit is speculating that filing means that NCSoft plans to come after Homecoming and other rogue servers. We don't have any reason to think that, and in fact, quite a lot of reasons to think just the opposite. We also, so that's the thing that I wanted to. Let's just look at that for a second. I wanted to react to that comment because honestly, I don't really think you have a whole lot of basis for that. So, Bree, I could see where you're coming from here, except that NCSoft shut the game down when it was making money live. So what's to say that now that they filed a fresh trademark application, that they wouldn't just tell you guys to shut it down again? It seems like it's more of a stretch to think they won't affect the server than to think that they are going to affect it. There's been obviously some theories about this. People have said, what if they do a classic WoW kind of thing with City of Heroes, right? That's a possibility. Other people have stated maybe they're getting a fresh trademark because they're going to go after these rogue servers. It's another possibility. There's a number of possibilities, I think, but I think for me, the big takeaway here is that don't just assume because it hasn't happened yet and you've been in talks with them that they can't just shut you down and shut you down in a heartbeat, right? They can do that, and they probably will, is my guess, but we'll see. Obviously, if you guys know my personal stance, I believe in community-run servers. I think that, if anything, community-run servers should be able to turn a profit, which is even more extreme than most opinions about community servers, right? So I'm the step above that. And that's just been in my experience. I've played a lot of community servers, and very oftentimes they've been run better than actual live servers. So it's like, it seems weird to me that they couldn't make money from that, considering they do it better than the actual people who get paid to do it. At least here in the expanded universe, I don't have the option to download it, but I think it's global. Oh, expanded universe, the EU. Oh man, dude. I've been way into Star Wars lately. You guys caught me there. I swear I was just reading about Star Wars too. I see EU and I'm just thinking, expanded universe. Europe is the expanded universe. All right. I don't really have much else to say about that. I just wanted to, I guess, give a little bit of comments about it. It's possible they won't take legal action. NCSoft in this case won't take legal action, but I don't think it's fair to assume that they won't, because ultimately speaking, it's their IP and money on the line, and it's very unlikely that a company who shut down a game when it was like successful is going to be unwilling to shut down community-run servers of a game when they weren't willing to sell their IP in the first place. That's all I'm trying to say. Let's get to our second topic, though. I didn't expect it, but there has been some news regarding Todd Coleman, the lead developer, lead head at Crowfall, said that Crowfall will be the most strategic virtual universe, and hinted at launch details. So I didn't expect this, but I wonder if this is because other Kickstarters are starting to make big announcements as well. For example, we'll cover today alone, New World has made a number of more announcements. Ashes of Creation has made more announcements about when their alpha's coming, when they're going to show off their MMO map, which they haven't showed off yet. And then also Camelot Unchained has a big promise for a big immersive experience, unlike anything they've shown so far as well. So there's been a lot of news, or announcements of news to come, I should say, from these different crowdfunded MMOs. Have you talked at all today about Pantheon or Camelot? Oh no, I haven't talked about it yet. I'm just starting right now, actually. I forgot today was Monday and overslept. Hi everyone, what's up, Maghorn? Okay, so let's scroll down and just read what he has to say. Okay. Todd Coleman says, Crowfall's evolution has been interesting. When we started, the game leaned more heavily on survival mechanics. Over time, we added more and more strategy and pulled the survival mechanics. By launch, we'll be the most strategic virtual universe. In my opinion, surpassing EVE Online. That's quite the claim. Obviously, you should believe in your product whenever you're advertising it. I think it's a bit ambitious to say EVE Online, because I think a big part of EVE Online's strategic aspects come from the scale of it, right? And basically no other game has competed with EVE in terms of scale. So I feel like EVE's a bad example, but maybe it's one of the only examples, so it just gets used because they don't really know what else to use. What else did he say? He says, all right, so someone asked him about launch and he replied with, it's sooner than one might think. We'll be talking about specifics soon, so stay tuned. All right, so basically that's another announcement of another announcement. You notice that a lot with Kickstarters. It's almost like they don't quite realize it might be better to just not make that announcement. Don't make an announcement of an announcement. I feel like that almost pisses people off, especially MMO fans, since they feel like they've been waiting for ages for a game. Crowfall, I think, obviously, compared to a lot of the other Kickstarter games, clearly has a lot more done, right? It clearly has a lot more going for it as well. Not to mention its scale won't be nearly as hard to manage, which is a big part of MMOs failing, of course, is scale, server, infrastructure, performance, and all of that kind of stuff. That's why I found it interesting that they chose to make EVE as an example, because you're basically creating a lobby-based MMO, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a good idea. It's a niche, right? It's a niche that hasn't been filled before. But how could a lobby MMO compete with a big sandbox MMO, EVE Online? I don't really think it could. Unless you could say, for example, state that screw permanence, you're talking about in a single campaign. I guess I could see that. Like a single campaign based on a single experience in Eve, but it doesn't really work like that, right? Because a big part of Eve is persistence, right? Persistent worlds. I mean, I should say that's a big part of any MMO, but that's not really a big part of Crowfall. The reason for that is that a lobby-based MMO, if you want to call it that, basically works like you create a server, you can affect the rule set on that server, and then you play on that server. That server also has a time limit. That time limit talks about how long the life of the server will last. A big feature of Crowfall is the fact that servers don't last forever. They eventually die. So it's a big part of the game that it's not about persistence. The only persistence in the game really is in the Eternal Kingdom, which is kind of like a home base of sorts. It's almost like a home instance, if you will. There's persistence in that. Apparently you can keep some of your items, or like maybe not items, but like I think it's you get some level of progression on your skill, and then I think you can also build your house and kingdom in the Eternal Kingdom, and then also enable PvP there. So it's not like it's just some random private instance, but it kind of is, in a way, a more private instance than an actual like open server, right? Thank you for subscribing, by the way, Vim007. Welcome to the Nor Club. I think the initial release was 2016. Yeah, I never really take the initial release dates of these things seriously, to be honest. So wouldn't sooner than you might think be ahead of the projected release? Yeah, you would think so. The thing about Crowfall, Huel, is they were supposed to soft launch last year. Supposedly that's what they said. And by soft launch, I mean they were actually going to go the early access, or whatever you want to call it, route that many people have not been necessarily happy about. They put that off, obviously, and so 2020 clearly is maybe a year they're looking at having something more tangible, like, say, for example, a public release of a beta, perhaps, or more information about launch. I don't really have anything else to add because everything else is just still as it was before, which is just you can make assumptions based on what's currently playable, but that doesn't really do us any good, right? Because they're promising that it's going to be different, and I guess we'll just wait and see. In your YouTube community post, the URL linking to Twitch is wrong. Oh man, really? That's annoying. Thank you for telling me that. Let me go check. I'm probably getting destroyed in the comments on that, aren't I? Yeah, it is. All right, I'm gonna edit it. All right, I guess just twitch./ take away the U should work. Yeah, it does. That's weird. Well, I guess my people on Twitter know how to reach me anyway. Yeah, thanks for telling me that, AI Bags. I appreciate it. You have Ashes with Battle Royale mode. Yeah, we're going to talk about Ashes as well. In fact, let's just talk about it now. Let's hop into Ashes first. Or third. Ashes released a creative director's letter. And it's a bit long, so I'll just link it if you guys want to check it out yourself. But in the letter, they essentially go into a lot of the details over the launch period, or sorry, the non-launch period, talking about their progress during 2019, talking about maybe certain things that they need to work on. For example, they talked about the studio growing in size, growing in scale. I'm not going to read this whole entire thing, so let's just breeze through this thing. Where risk versus reward can be truly felt, an intrusive pay-to-win monetization has no place. I find that a bit funny considering they put monetization in a cash shop in their Battle Royale version of their game. Which,
hey, thanks.
That's interesting, isn't it? That you would actually say something like this. Like, why even say this? I feel like you should just delete this part. Just delete that. Yeah, just delete this whole part. Because I don't know if that's necessarily true, because I guess you can argue what intrusive means, right? What does intrusive mean? I mean, maybe there's a bunch of different arguments you could make there. But you had a cash shop in your Battle Royale, which was not even your real game, but supposed to be a test of your game. I don't know if you should. How big is the studio now? I mean, let's see if they say anything. It says we've grown significantly, but it doesn't say in what ways or by how much. So, okay, I guess we just take their word for it, obviously. It's not out of the question to think that they've expanded how many people are working for them and working on the game. 2020 will prove to be a year of progress and MMORPG testing. Next month, we will begin internal testing of the MMORPG Alpha 1 client. I'm also proud to announce at the Game Developers Conference in March of 2020, we will be showing off an early look at Alpha 1. Okay? So, yeah, that's probably the most important thing to read in this entirety of this post, is that alpha for the MMORPG aspect, the client, the map, if you will, the worlds, is being announced and supposedly being worked on internally next month. And then they're supposed to be targeting March 2020, a Alpha 1 version of that game. The reason why that's significant for those who haven't been following Ashes of Creation is before they had their Battle Royale version, and that's what they were primarily testing. The siege mechanics were more recently tested, but they hadn't tested the actual MMORPG worlds, like the persistent worlds. And I talked about that in my video overviewing all the Kickstarter projects currently. And I mentioned in that video that until I saw something from the actual MMORPG aspect, I wasn't really going to pay the Battle Royale gameplay or Battle Royale response much mind, right? Because to me, that's just, I mean, the Ashes of Creation apocalypse is kind of, I don't know, it's this weird thing where the fans of the game will say, oh, it's for testing, oh, it's for testing. And then everybody else is kind of like looking in and being like, then why are they monetizing it, right? If you guys remember my biggest problem with Ashes of Creation, it's been transparency. This article doesn't really change that, right? They talked about the workforce increasing. Okay, but by how much? There's no transparency there, right? So I guess that basically means nothing to me, because how am I supposed to take it to mean anything else? They talked about not having intrusive pay-to-win monetization, but you guys are already monetizing a game that's not even released, and you're monetizing it in a game that nobody asked for, a Battle Royale version of the game. The other thing is that nowhere in this entirety of this post does it say that they've raised enough money. Think about that. Nowhere in the entirety of this post does it say they've raised enough money. You guys remember what I said last time about Ashes of Creation? I told you guys there was a statement from the CEO himself that said, we need $30 million to fund this game at its like full capacity, like what we want to actually get done with the game. They haven't raised 30 million. There's nowhere publicly that's stated that they've raised 30 million. And that's why it's like, I know some people are excited to get any news period, and the announcement of an alpha, here's the map in question, an announcement of the alpha of the MMORPG map, for example. Yeah, that is exciting, but I'm still wondering about where and why is there a lack of transparency regarding your budgets? Like, we, as in, you know, us, the MMO audience here, we're not really sure if you guys can even fund the game yet, because you haven't even stated that you can, right? They haven't even stated that the game's fully funded yet. And I can really see now, like after especially going into detail on a bunch of different Kickstarter MMOs, I think that's people's biggest problems. It's just like, it's not a matter of like, you can have a bunch of good ideas, right? But it's a matter of, are you actually going to get the project done? And when people aren't hearing things like, we're funded, I don't know about you guys, but that makes me think, are you going to get the project done? Because if you don't get it funded and you're trying to monetize on your Battle Royale version of the game, to me, that says you don't have enough money yet. So are you just hoping to get more money as you release more content and then get more people to buy into it? You see what I'm saying? That's what I'm a little bit worried about. Any info about the test of the node system? They didn't. Let me search node on this page to see if they even said anything regarding node. In 2020, you can look forward to new blogs on classes, node types, freehold buildings, and equipment. Yeah, so that was the only thing that mentioned nodes. I'm going to assume that them just calling it the Alpha 1 experience, which I admire that it isn't under NDA, so let me give them credit for that. The fact that it isn't under NDA shows that they're at least willing to show off something like substance, right? Or they're not afraid of how people will react to such. So I have to give them credit for not putting it under NDA. This 2020 will see the public testing of Castle Siege mode in Apocalypse, so they never even tested it yet. Okay. And yeah, so I didn't see anything about the node system, which, by the way, might arguably be the most important part of the game. And we've still not seen it tested in actuality yet, right? Again, other things that I start to think about. I'm just explaining my thought process. You guys don't have to be as paranoid as me, but one thing that I vowed to do whenever I was the young kid who was sitting there waiting for SWTOR and sitting there waiting for a bunch of other MMOs that launched, and like Warhammer Online even, that flopped, and basically just eating up all the posts, eating up all the the hype, right? There's nothing wrong with being hyped about games, right? Being hyped is part of human nature. It's fun. It's like you have the anticipation that something good is going to happen, right? So you're hyped for it. But where I found that hype was very problematic is in the case of MMOs, you have all this big hype that comes, which is part of an MMO period, right? It's part of a social social situation. Is hype, right? Leads to things like fear of missing out. But my thing about hype is when it comes to MMOs and the ones that launched before, they will tell you everything under the sun. So you can't really just take people's words for things. Like when someone says, my game's going to be an MMO, as we pointed out last week on the podcast, that could only mean 3 players. Is that really an MMO? So it's like, I always urge you guys to not take things at face value. So you don't have to be paranoid like me. Just don't take things, so literally like they're the truth. Because these people are incentivized to tell you certain things because they want you to think it's better off than it is. And that's just kind of how it works, right? That's how the real world works. They're very often not going to say, oh, everything's not going according to plan. Everything's shit right now, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not going to say that. They're going to say, yeah, everything's on schedule and we're going to get everything done. It is the most important part of the game. The game literally raises and falls with the node system. Yeah, that's what I believe as well, Gardener. With that, they have nothing. I mean, to be honest, Ashes looks very promising if we ignore the financial part of things. And in my opinion, it takes them a bit longer than it should. Yeah, we talked about New World coming to Steam as well, so we can go into New World now since we've obviously my intention whenever we talk about these Kickstarter like updates and news updates is not to just make it seem like nothing good is coming out of this. Of course, like if we indeed see an alpha test of the MMORPG worlds and we can see some level of testing over the node system that's being so highly touted, that is a good thing. The fact that it's not under NDA is another good thing. But there's not much else to say about that, to be fair. Amazon has been releasing obviously a slew of news recently, simply because they're about to launch in March, right? Is it March? Am I still right about that? In the spring. Well, I don't want to say exactly what month because who knows exactly if they're going to make it that exact month or maybe push it back, but I think they were saying the spring, right? Isn't that what they're targeting, the spring? So with New Worlds, they have released a bunch of interesting tidbits of information that even as someone, I'm deeply involved as myself, I was not familiar with. A good example of this is there was a screenshot that was recently shown from their Twitter. Well, it shows a screenshot from in-game on their Twitter. It said, "Not all weapons are steel and wood. Master the arcane arts to help push back the corrupted." This is significant because in New World there wasn't magic, right? And I can tell you now that I've told developers, both on record and off record, that is magic going to be a thing? And we never really got answers. So it was always kind of like magic seemed like it would be in the game, but it'd be like something that wasn't so readily available. Now we're actually seeing some implementation of magic, apparently, and confirmation of magic as well. So I think that that's a good thing because before the combat was primarily like a colonial Dark Souls of sorts, if you will. And now adding in things like magic makes it feel more like an MMO, if you will, right? That will be the skin they sell. Funny. there's been a lot of talk about the PvP systems in New World, because if you guys have been following the projects, and if not, I'll give you a quick little rundown. Basically, the game before felt a lot like a survival game, where there was kind of really no rules. You kind of just killed whoever and you build wherever, and it was kind of a little bit more open-ended. They have announced that that's no longer the case. There's going to be a flagging system in the game. There's also going to be a militia that you can join in order to fight against other factions, and also there is a AI system, a horde system, where if you play on a PvE server, or if you just happen to be around an event that happens, you'll have hundreds upon hundreds of AI assaulting your structure, your building, your house, your keep, whatever you want to call it, your particular land that you've built for yourself, your settlement, I think is the official name in New World. But the news about that PvP news, I should say, that's a bit redundant. That news for some people was a bit disheartening. I'll say that I am a person who very much enjoys the openness and dangerous feel of a sandbox MMO, especially one that offers PvP, because that's part of creating a dangerous world. But I also understand that not everybody is into that kind of game, first off, and second off, if Amazon is going to do a game like that, it's very unlikely that they were going to stick to their original, just super hardcore perspective of it. Now I think there's a chance to lose something in your inventory, but you don't lose everything in your inventory as well, so they've changed that. For some people, they call that making the game more, dare I say, Care Bear, and I can see where they're coming from. But that's why this was supposed to be pretty significant, because apparently this month, this was posted 2 days ago, New World said strong walls and gates won't hold forever. Take the fight to other players as well as the corrupted. More info on PvP and war coming in January. So apparently we're going to get some more news about the new PvP systems. I think the fact that they're going to be introducing a militia system and also some different war systems where you can lay claim on certain territories will at least make it harder to offline raid people, as well as just grief people endlessly. So I'm eager, like, I'm not just against the idea because it's just makes it less or makes it more Care Bear. I'm not one of those people. I'm more interested in seeing it in actual practice. If the system ends up working and it doesn't make the game feel like a shell of what it was before, and in fact makes the game a better experience, I'm all for it. So I look forward to seeing what the new PvP and war information is concerning New World, and obviously I will know soon enough myself as I can test the game in alpha. As you guys know, I'm an alpha tester and also have consulted on the game, but I'm also under NDA, so I can't talk about anything that I experience or have experienced really so far, so sorry. Yeah, so I'm glad that Every Hole is a Goal mentioned that the way that they're going to be handling war in the game is, instead of having just like everybody's fighting on the map, it's going to be an instance war where it's 50 versus 50. So 50 versus 50 wars. This is not unlike Albion Online, which has done a similar thing before, where the game is a sandbox, but whenever you want to lay claim to a territory, you actually have to have only, I think it's an 8-person group, maybe 16 for the initial war camp, and then it's like 8 for the actual guild versus guild. New World is probably taking inspiration from that a little bit, and seeing as it, for Albion Online, has at least helped in reducing some of the griefing, maybe it seems like a good decision. I don't even know if you're, I didn't even know you were BlackRuins, Every Hole is a Goal, so. I always thought you were some random guy that just had a funny name. Is the siege going to be time limited? You know what? I don't know. I don't think that's been released yet. And that's a good question though, Gardener. It's a question that I would have too, because that's how they do it in Albion. In Albion, it's a time siege. So you have like, you lay claim, you know when your claim's about to go live. Then whenever it goes live, you port into the instance, you fight over the territory. The fight itself lasts a certain amount of time. When it's over, the victor takes the territory. I'm assuming it's going to be something like that, but again, these are just assumptions, and even if I knew, I couldn't say really anyway, because it's not publicly released. AI bags, that's why I said griefing with quotation marks, is most of the time people tell me griefing or use the word griefing, they're using it incorrectly. And a good example of this is people will say things like, oh, PvPers are just griefers. It's like, is every PvPer a griefer? Is every PvPer's only desire to just make your experience horrible and not have good, enjoyable PvP? No, but, you know, it's easy to lump everybody in, make a big-ass generalization, and say that because some angry 12-year-old PvPers want to just kill me over and over again in WoW, that means all of them do. Clearly it doesn't mean that, as most of us know, but that's why I usually am tongue-in-cheek whenever people say things like griefing, because most of the time they're saying griefing. It's, yeah, exactly, Simper. It's just a really easy brush that people paint, and it's super generic. It's just like, oh, you're a griefer, you just like griefing. For example, I made a video that talked about will PvP-focused MMOs just be destined to fail? And in that, I pointed out how clearly, like historically, PvE-focused games have had way bigger budget, way more support, way more people working on the game, and so it's not easy to compare it. It's like apples and oranges. One has gotten way more love and support, the other one has kind of been left to the wayside, and yet PvP is still super popular. Think about that. It's not really been a big focus in a game for a while, and yet it's still talked about. It's still a part of every current MMO. Every current multiplayer online RPG as well. So, I don't want to get into another rant about PvP, but I usually end up ranting about it because I think people just make this assumption that if you like to kill another player in a game, it automatically makes you a bad person. And that's the same as saying, if I personally, for example, I don't like onions much. I'm Hispanic and I don't like onions much. And so whenever I order something, I always say no onions. But does that mean that I tell people that nobody likes onions and everybody who likes onions is just like a, you know, complete idiot or something? It's like, no, I don't like onions. Doesn't mean everybody else who likes onions is some like bad person or something, right? My English. Exactly. Some are like that, but the majority are either looking for a challenge or a good fair fight. If you love making armor and that's all you ever do, if someone comes up and steals all the armor you make, that's pretty much ruining someone else's experience. But that person consented to that. And that's the thing. Is like, let's say I joined a game and the game had full loot and I got killed and they stole all my stuff. It is 100% my fault. 100% my fault. Like, let me reiterate that. If I joined a game that has full loot PvP and I got killed and lost all of my shit and complained about it, I'm an idiot. Because I literally read full loot PvP game, okay, let me get in there. Died and then expected something different. It's like, why would you expect something different? It's a full loot game. Of course they're gonna steal your shit, dude. You gotta defend it. And guess how you defend things? Make friends, right? You meet other people, right? You're safer. You pay attention. You don't just walk around with 17 rare armor pieces. Maybe you only walk around with one because you're just afraid somebody's gonna kill you and take your stuff. I would blame myself too for being incompetent. If I died and somebody took my stuff, I'd be like, damn it. You got me. Because that's the game, right? That's the whole game. In the same way that people love Path of Exile or they love Diablo because it's a looter game, right? You're just gathering all this loot. I love looter games too. The only difference is I like taking the loot from you as a player. You see? And it's funny because for some people that just makes me morally a bad person when it's like, the only difference is I'm not taking the loot from NPCs. I'm taking it from other players. But I'm a looter as well. I love playing games where I can get a bunch of loot, bunch of cool loot, all the super nice, you know, sexy loot, the cool gear. I like that kind of game too. But I don't want to get it just from killing NPCs or killing AI, fake players basically. I like to get that from actually killing good players. You know, because to me it's like the good players are the ones that have even better loot, right? You'd be surprised. On that video, man, people got so triggered whenever I said, I brought up an analogy of sheep versus wolves. And like, the fact that people don't want to admit that they're sheep in that scenario, to me, is just hilarious. But they got really offended that I said sheep. And to explain my analogy for those who are listening now and think I'm insulting you, my sheep versus wolf analogy was actually explained to help people understand why PvP games get so bad. It was actually to prove a point in the other direction. So like, here's a good example of it. If an ecosystem, right, has, let's say, 100 sheep and 2 wolves, male and a female, those wolves can feast on the sheep, but it's not going to seem like that big of a deal, right? Because they'll kill one every now and then, they eat them for a while. The population for the sheep is going to keep increasing, right? That 100 maybe goes to 2, 3, 4, 500. But the wolf population also increases, right? So they're eating the sheeps and living off the sheeps. And so now the wolves start having more children, so to say. And now more wolves are eating. The problem arises when the wolves have no natural predators and the environment itself isn't harsh enough. What happens, and this is actual real shit in biology, you guys can go look this up in a textbook. What happens is in the ecosystem, you have an imbalance. And when an imbalance happens, no matter what side it comes from, either carnivore, omnivore, whatever, there can be problems, right? And so what happens is the wolves have no natural predators in this environment, so they become what's called an apex predator, which basically means the only thing that's killing them is kind of like their own people, their own species, if you will. And so they have no natural predator and they have no fear of the environment. So in this analogy, the wolves basically are just feasting on everything. So what happens if a wolf is allowed to just eat as many sheep as he wants? Well, they eat all of the sheep. What happens when all of the sheep are gone? Well, either the wolves eat each other or they die. And that's basically the analogy that fits most PvP games that have failed. There's been no safety, no gameplay avenues for sheep to explore other than just combat. And there hasn't been enough tools for those sheep to use besides just their own personal ability. And what I mean by that is, if I'm a sheep, which is essentially in this argument when I'm talking about MMOs, essentially means I don't really PvP that much, and I'm not maybe particularly even good at it. So maybe I don't play much, which by nature means I'm probably not that good at it. I can't expect to beat a wolf one-on-one, because he's put 1,000, 100, 300 hours into the game. I put 20. The sad thing is many people have this delusion where you should just be able to beat someone like that, even though they've worked way harder than you. Anyway, beside the point, I shouldn't be able to beat that person. But what if I had 10 sheep? If I had 10 sheep versus that one wolf, we can probably take them down, right? So that's why sheep huddle together, right? They form a big flock. Or another example, you can think of other animals and like wildebeest. Wildebeest are another example. If you've ever watched those videos of like lions eating wildebeest, the same kind of concept. They're in a big herd. They're traveling together for safety in numbers, right? But when they get isolated, that's when they exactly a zerg, exactly. When they get isolated, that's when you pick them off and you start getting the kills, right? And so the problem in an MMO, the reason why wolves end up ruining PvP MMOs is because developers don't give the sheep enough tools to kill the wolves. And so a good example of a tool that you can use against wolves, of course, are things like siege weapons, right? Are things like working together in a big group, are things like being able to have a better economy than a wolf does, because you have more people involved in your economy. And what I mean by that is that if a wolf is a wolf, like in the truest sense of the word, he's probably a red player, which means he's evil alignment, which probably means he probably can't go to NPC towns or cities. And so because he can't go to those towns because he will be attacked, what developers can do is make those towns really nice to live in, right? They can make the NPC towns very safe and very fortuitous to live in. So then therefore the wolf is giving up that aspect of the game. He doesn't have the benefit of trading on an auction house, of having good rates, of having safety. He doesn't have any of those benefits. He has the benefit, though, of stealing your shit. So there should come a risk versus reward, but the problem, as I'm mentioning, is in my analogy, sheeps need enough things, enough tools in order to deal with the wolves. If they don't have enough, they just get ate. And when they get ate, there's no one left playing the game, because the truth of the matter is, and this is true in also society, like if you go look outside or go look up a documentary on animals and predators, if there's too many of a predator, it's not really good, right? Because then that means that they're going to have a problem of food. It's kind of like the problem with the dinosaurs. You guys remember so they get hit by a meteor. They get hit by a meteor, and not all the dinosaurs immediately died. Like, that's like a common misconception, and I used to think that too as a kid. Oh, the meteor just hits and it just killed all the dinosaurs. I was like, wait, that doesn't make sense. So how did it kill the rest of the dinosaurs? Well, it didn't kill all of them technically, but it killed a lot of them, and it killed the biggest ones the fastest, right? And what's the reason for that? They didn't have enough food. That's it. And so, like, it's funny. It seems like silly, but you can actually take analogies from an actual ecosystem, a biological ecosystem, and compare it to a game. Because is a MMO not trying to be a world, right? Is it not trying to create its own ecosystem? They are, at least usually, trying to. The difference in the analogy is that the sheep are paying to participate, as well as the wolves. They are. Except paying doesn't entitle you to be good, nor does it entitle you to get anything other than just the gameplay experience. So if a part of the game, for example, is full loot PvP, if a sheep is paying for that, congratulations. You're paying to get your stuff stolen. I mean, or you can find someone to play with, or you can form a guild, or you can form a coalition, or you can find friends who are going to protect you, or you can hire other people who are better PvPers. And Card and I have talked about this before. These ideas are actually simple in practice, but they just haven't really been done in MMOs before. Bounty systems are hardly ever done, right? Alignment systems are, when they're done, they're so easy to exploit. The things I mentioned about making NPC towns very nice to live in and beneficial for those who can benefit from them, right? The players who are not evil, basically. That's another way that you can control a bit of that. Friendly fire, of course, is another way you can control things like that. Making a game not so focused on just brute force like mechanics is another way you can help sheep find a place in a game, if you will. People from the CDC studied what players did when the plague happened in WoW before BC, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, what would they end up saying about it? Just out of curiosity. I was the number one noob in vanilla. You just answered your question, or you can find another game to spend your money. And let's face it, people do that all the time. They do, but they've only done that because the game that they're playing is not that great. And I think it's a big shocker for some people to realize that actually some people who aren't good at PvP enjoy PvP. I think honestly that's like for some people it blows their mind. And how do I know that? Because I've played with so many people who have literally said these words. I suck at PvP, but boy is it fun. I've heard that so many times. There are so many people who still get enjoyment out of things, guys, when they're not that good. I know it's surprising, but it's like sometimes you don't have to be great at everything to enjoy it, right? Sometimes you just have fun playing the game. And a big part of having fun playing the game is having other things to do in the game besides just fight. Because if it's just about fighting, then the game isn't a true ecosystem, right? It's just an ecosystem of death. Like a true ecosystem is like, let me go get my food, and let me go find a place to stay, and let me go, converse and deal with other, species and other populations and stuff, and let me trade, there's other things that happen in an ecosystem. In many MMOs, especially the PvP variants, basically the only thing to do primarily is just kill each other. So it's kind of like, imagine if animals didn't need to eat, didn't have harsh scenarios like with environments, like a harsh environment, PvE, right? Imagine they didn't have any of that, and it was just like PvP the whole time. There'd be so many dead animal species. We'd have so many extinct animals. Like, it'd be horrible, right? But, well, the problem is that animals can't just all kill each other en masse because they have to also deal with the hardships of life. And so, like, that's another big part of a PvP game, is that if the PvE or the environment part of the game is so easy that all you have to worry about is killing other players, then that kind of takes away from the experience a bit, because the game should also be be fun to play in the sense that you're surviving against the environments versus it's only you surviving against other players trying to kill you in said environment. They said the interesting thing was because people behaved predictably and also unpredictably, CDC thought it's really interesting because they didn't consider some stuff that players did, and that made them sort of reevaluate their initial ideas about events happening in real life. Interesting. Look at this as Nerdslayer again, yeah, especially right now. There are a ton of terrible Warhammer players on Return of Reckoning. Yeah, and honestly, Warhammer was one of the best games for that, I think, originally. You had tons of bad players playing those games, and they'll even admit they're bad players. Like, in fact, I had someone in my scenario say, like, sorry, dude, I suck. He was, like, the only healer in our group, and they were like, man, we're not getting enough heals. And he was like, sorry, I suck. And nobody said anything. No one shit on him. No one said, ha, you suck. Everyone's just like, playing healer, bro. You know, like, they were just happy the guy at least played healer. So... in business, you cannot run off of customers because when one goes, then another, and pretty soon you're out of a business. The same is true for MMOs. You have to appeal to all... No, that's completely wrong, dude. I don't even think you understand business if you think that, man. Because not even businesses appeal to everybody. It's literally a farce to think that a company, period, tries to appeal to everybody. It doesn't happen. It's impossible to appeal to everybody. It is literally impossible to appeal to everybody. Right now in chat, I bet you I can say something controversial that one of you disagree with, right? I'm sure one of you can disagree with something I say. Does that necessarily mean that what depends on opportunity costs? What depends on opportunity costs? Weepa Jumpman said, the more healthy, helpful community is involved in PvP, the more I'm willing to get involved and enjoy it. Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to look at it. Here's where the big... sorry, I'm trying to catch up with chat. Here's where the big disconnect is. What you say is true and accurate. However, investors and decision makers have no other interest but making an ROI ASAP. So one thing to take into consideration there is that you're talking about investors who don't care about the market, don't care about MMOs, and don't care about gaming most of the time. They're just caring about, seeing statistics on a sheet, seeing money on a sheet. You see what I'm saying? That's what they care about. But those aren't the only people who are involved in game development. Look at all the other genres currently right now. If you go to Steam, I bet you'll find a number of indie games that are top performers in their fields. Are those games only based off of, interest of investors and decision makers? No. It all comes from pay structure. How are you getting your funding? If you're getting your funding from a bunch of big wigs in Silicon Valley, a bunch of suits in Silicon Valley, you're absolutely right. They want you to appeal to as many people as possible. But guess what? That's not the only way to get funded these days. And it hasn't been the only way to get funded in the past, 6 or 7 years. It's just that, again, we talk about this a lot, but it's scale. How big do you want to build your MMO? If you want to build it massive, then yeah, you're going to need millions and millions of dollars, a big Kickstarter project, etc. But there are dozens of MMOs that currently exist that are smaller scale that have launched already and launched with basically next to no budgets. Project Gorgon is a good one that I've talked about that's still in early access that is basically run by 2 or 3 people, right? And they do not appeal to everybody with that game. In fact, even the price of the game itself doesn't appeal to everybody. I think what's shocking to some people is the realization that if everything appeals to everybody, then basically we have monochromatic games. And that's what happened from 2011 through 2015. Why do we have all these games that just seem like copycats from each other? Because they were made by investors, right? They were made by bigwigs. They were made by suits. But not every MMO is destined to be made by an investor company or like Daybreak is run by an investment company. Not every company is subjected to that fate, right? To be ran by a board of investors where art doesn't matter. It's not just some foregone conclusion is what I'm trying to say. What's the MMO roundtable discussion today? It's about server types and people's opinions on server types. You can always go and play another game. Now, should they not go play another game? Or should PvP have some structure and PKers should think what type of players are we killing in the game? Shouldn't we think of the game's health? It's not the player's job to ever have to police themselves. Card and I talk about this a lot. We're pretty passionate about it. But we think that's such an ass backwards mentality that developers adopt, where they're just like, all right, it's like, come on, players, it's up to the players, right? You guys can make it. And players will say that too. You can make it less toxic, right? We can make it less toxic. Carlos says it all the time, but if you're trying to make people vote with their wallet as a means of proving a point, it ain't gonna happen. And in this case, if you're telling people, hey, don't have fun, don't kill people, and only kill people within this specific little box, it's not gonna happen, dude. It's not gonna happen. You cannot trust players to not fuck shit up. Developers build games and rules in games to keep players from doing shit like that. So like, I hate whenever MMOs have this mentality of like, oh, just leave it up to the players. No. Well, why? Why would you do that? Why would you leave it up to the players? What are you going to do whenever the players just decide to kill everybody? Are you going to say, well, you shouldn't think that? It's like, no. You'd have to actually change the game if you didn't want them to do that. Do you see what I'm saying? Here's a great example of this. Why do regulations over gambling exist? Anyone in chat want to answer that? Why do regulations over alcohol, drugs, and gambling exist? Is it because, well, actually get rid of those regulations. Just let people handle it on their own, man. Let people police it on their own, right? Well, no. That's why there's regulations in the first place, right? I hate this like hands-off approach that a lot of developers have where they're just like, oh, let's just not touch anything. We can't do anything. Yes, you can. You literally can do something. It is your game. You can actually design the game in a different way. You can do things in the game to help with that. Like, you're not helpless is what I'm trying to say. And I hate that mentality that it's just like, leave it up to the players, leave it up to the players. The players are just going to kill and do whatever the fuck they want, man. That's just the cold hard truth, dude. I've seen it way too many times. As of now, I've played at least 7 full loot games, and nearly every single time when there wasn't a proper system to protect other players, players just feasted on whoever they could feast on, right? I mean, I can bring up great examples of this. Rust, DayZ, Darkfall. Those are probably my biggest examples I can think of right now. Yeah, let's cater to the crazy lady that has absurd demands, which will put our actual customers on hold. Yeah, it's about the audience that you want to aim for. If you want to appeal to, sorry, what my expertise is? I mean, I guess I worked in construction sales for 7 years, and I've worked on projects that are worth over millions of dollars. Let's see, the biggest project I think I've ever worked on, and you guys can look these up. It's between the Methodist Hospital in Houston and probably the Baylor College of Medicine as well. Those are the biggest projects I've personally worked on as a project manager. So I have actually had a lot of experience managing big, large projects and selling big, large projects. It just wasn't involved in gaming, right? I quit that job because that shit was boring to me. That's why I'm here. I'm loving these indie games. Noita, for example, is amazing. I like that one too, and I've also been playing Disco Elysium lately. Silicone, LOL. Yeah, I'm a southern boy. Making MMOs is historically not the best investment strategies. If you want an ROI, have you guys heard of mobile games? Oh man. Do you have your mobile phone? His expertise is his channel. He's followed the fall of so many MMOs. Probably one of the few people in the world as knowledgeable on the topic. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things people will typically attack like expertise when they can't make an argument. If you actually make an argument, you can potentially push back against what I'm saying, but I don't think anybody in chat here wants to make an argument that you should appeal to everybody all the time. Like, does anybody want to make that argument? Because I don't even think a majority of developers believe that, right? Because otherwise, what's the point in having a vision if you're just making a game for what everyone else wants, right? What's the vision? You know, what's the vision of the game if it's for everybody? There isn't a vision. It's hard to make a good game when you're not controversial. Like, do we need to bring up Dark Souls? The reason why I love talking about Dark Souls is their no-nonsense attitude towards, we are not adding an easy mode in our game, right? It pisses people off. I love it. I love the tears over Dark Souls. I don't even fucking play the game and I love it. I love reading all the Twitter threads, the Reddit threads, like the discussion about it. I love when people say, well, they should add an easy mode just because. Appeal to everybody, right? It's like, no. It's their decision. It's their game. If they don't want to appeal to everybody, that is their decision. They already have made it abundantly clear, Dark Souls in this case, they're not going to appeal to everybody. And they're doing pretty fucking well without having to appeal to everybody. So, again, it's like this rhetoric that gets stuck in people's head, and I feel like, frankly speaking, it comes from America, that if you are the biggest, you're the most successful artistically as well. And it's like, just because something does well commercially doesn't mean it's a good game. Like, I can right now on Steam show you guys 4 different games that have negative reviews or mixed reviews, and yet still have way more players than are playing any of the other MMOs that we play. Right? Anyone want to take me up on that offer? Because I know one company, and all I have to do is say their name. Wildcard. Go look at their games, man. They get negative game reviews all the time. Most of their games are negatively reviewed. And still so many people are playing the game. How is it that a controversial game is still played so much? Well, because clearly some people like the controversial part, right? They might not care about the other complaints. They like that part that's controversial. If you want to be big business, you need to try and cater to everybody. Think brands like, so Gardner, I think you bring up a really good point here. Gardner mentions that in order to be a big business, companies like Coca-Cola and McDonald's, you have to have small companies in that market space thriving because they simply fill, those are the big companies, but there are more companies that are small in the market space that are thriving because they simply fill more niche tastes. And there's good examples of this, of course. A good example of this is the difference between a corporation. That's what we're talking about, is the difference between a corporation, which is always driven towards profit. Let me say that again. A corporation is always driven towards profit. It's literally the meaning and point of a corporation. Let me say that again. A corporation is always driven towards profit. It's literally always driven towards profit. That's the point of making a corporation, right? It's no longer like when your company goes public, it's no longer about just like, hey, let's do things that are good, right? No, you have investors, you have a board, you have to satisfy things. You have all these numbers, and not to mention people are buying your stock. The people don't care about whatever. It's like, the shareholders only care about profit. They do. A corporation is always driven towards profit. Once you realize that, you realize the problem isn't appealing to everybody. The problem is corporations are the only ones who've been making MMOs. That's the problem. Because if, like in the RPG indie market, if more indie developers have the chance and ability to make more indie MMOs, there's going to be an innovation event, right? I'm not going to say it's going to happen overnight, but eventually, right? Early access survival crafting open world, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Good topic given our current PvE versus PvP talk. If there's a way to fuck something up, players will exploit it 100%. Oh, 100%. 100%. I've done it myself. I've exploited. If you give me a player the tool to circumvent having to get negative alignment by just, putting on one setting here and then like running over and killing someone in this zone instead, why wouldn't I do it? Is it my fault that you designed your game with a flaw that you're still not fixing? Like, it's when people make the argument in Elder Scrolls Online, oh, animation canceling, I hate it. I agree. Except, are they going to change it? Which takes away an aspect of their game? Probably not. To use a better example, Super Smash Bros. Melee. It's like somebody playing Super Smash Bros. Melee and saying, oh my god, wave dashing. Why is that even allowed? It's a glitch. Maybe you could even say it's an exploit, right? It's a glitch. But it's a way that people are playing the game. So if you don't take a hard stance against it, people will use it as a normal way of playing the game. Go watch Super Smash Bros. Melee. People are using crazy ass like half inputs all the time because they found a way to bypass a lot of frames, right? They can they can speed up time. I always hate when there are rules against doing things allowed in the game. If you're going to punish people, just make it so it can't be done. It's easier and clearer. I think it depends on what you're talking about. Like, if it's a matter of killing a low-level player, I feel like it is much easier to just make it not allowed. But I think that that's a much simpler answer, and that sometimes you can come up with other things that can get the same, or can make the same thing accomplished, or accomplish the same thing, sorry. I'm trying to speak English here. That can accomplish the same thing without having to make it just like it's black or it's white. I don't like design decisions that are like, either you do or you don't. I'm not a big fan of those, because I think that takes away, for example, a lot of experience of the player, a lot of personal experience, a lot of sandbox elements of a game. And obviously, as a sandbox fan, those are my favorite kind of games. That's a big thing for me. It's important to me. ArcGauge is a good example of this. Chinese players actually started physically blocking popular trade routes to keep people from making money pretty recently. So there's the reason why PvP games end up lost in time mentality and lack regulations. Yeah, basically, it's just developers launch a PvP game and then just expect that that's just it. But I love bringing up this analogy. For those who've played D&D here or role-played before, there's a concept called the Dungeon Master, right? The DM, the person who basically is running the game, so to say. Think of the DM in a video game context as a developer who's actively changing the game, right? Actively changing the game. So now imagine in this scenario, we have, me and my group in D&D have engaged with another group, and we smash them, right? And we take all their stuff. The developer could, or sorry, the DM in that scenario could say, okay, that was too easy. So guess what he does? He makes the next engagement that much harder, right? Or maybe we find a way to exploit a certain system. So what does the DM do? Well, the next turn, he decides to change that by adding something else to the game, right? The DM is always keeping you on your toes because you think you outsmart him, and then he's like, nope, there's another dragon here in this cave, right? That's the point of kind of being a DM, is it's like you're creating these stories, and you're also on the fly creating conflict. You're creating moments of time to talk and maybe introducing new characters, introducing the story, right? The DM has a very hands-on role to constantly deal with balancing issues. So if a party in a DM, or sorry, in a dungeon party is saying, man, this is too easy, does it just continue to be too easy? Anybody want to answer that question? When you're playing D&D, and all of you collectively together, your 5-man group or whatever, says, man, this game's too easy, does the DM look at you and be like, yeah, sorry, it's just easy, you know, what can you do? No. The DM looks at you and it's like, you mother... I'll show you easy. Maybe he even smiles at you. Yeah, it's easy. I'll show you easy. And then he adds like 3 dragons to the next encounter, right? Because that's the fun of the game, right? And I think that's a big problem in MMOs, is that they used to have that, right? Asheron's Call had them. EverQuest had them. Matrix Online had them. Star Wars Galaxies had them. Other games have had GMs who can actually affect the game, and in-game will affect the way things happen. This has been done before, and it's a pretty successful way to do it, but it's something that's kind of fallen by the wayside. And part of it is obviously that having an idea of someone focusing on that, it's hard for you to understand how it makes you money. A lot of problems, I think, that arise in MMO development are because they're so short-sighted, they don't understand that, yeah, maybe it doesn't make you money right now, but it's going to make you money in the future. And a good example of this is, if you have an ability for a developer to constantly affect the difficulty level of a game, how could it ever get stagnant? How can an encounter ever be the same as another encounter? It wouldn't be. They could change it. They could literally see you in your group and then spawn another monster. Hey, you attracted a boss this time, buddy. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like you can't figure out what to do when there's problems. It's just more of the time, if you make it to where the game itself is the only thing solving the problems, aka the systems, it's pretty hard to make a game like that. Let me say that again. It's pretty hard to design an MMO to where the systems basically fix all of the problems. And there's no need for player interaction, whether from players or developers. Has anyone ever seen that happen? I've never seen that. That sounds like a paradise to me. That the systems could be so good and iron tight that you wouldn't even need anybody to actually every now and then tweak a couple of things and move. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no maintenance. It just runs on its own. That doesn't really exist yet. I'm not saying it can't exist in the future. Maybe AI gets so good they can just, change on the fly without having to have someone tweak the code or add an NPC here, add an NPC there. But if there's one thing I hate, it's developers taking the stance of like, oh, there's just nothing we can do about it. It's like, you can't load yourself into the game and just spawn a monster? You can't load yourself into the game, see that one faction is dominating, and then change the odds? You're just too afraid to do that because that's controversial. And I think that's just a big part of it all, is like, if you're willing to say, like Asheron's Call did, hey guys, the story of our game is unfolding as you play it, and the story is not chosen by you guys or it's not chosen only by you guys. You can affect the story, but we are creating the story, right? The reason why Asheron's Call had such a cool development cycle is that it had a span of like 2 to 3 years where every single month there was a new story update that made you have to go out in the world and experience it. Whether you had to find an NPC to talk to, whether you had to fight in a certain area, unlock a crystal, maybe capture a crystal, decide to, open a crystal or not open a crystal. I've talked about this in my Asheron's Call video. A great example in Asheron's Call is there's a point where an event happens where crystals open up and monsters start to pour out of them. And then one of the towns, a major town in the game, literally gets wiped from the map. If they tried to do that in current day, could you imagine how pissed off people would be? How emotional people would be? But it's not that that's wrong, right? It's that that's a controversial thing to do, right? That's a risky thing to do. But Asheron's Call did it because they were like, hey, it's part of our story. So it's like, maybe you as a player could say, but I love this town, and in this town, doesn't matter, dude. You're just one player, dude. It's their game. They can wipe a town off the face of the map if they want to, right? They have the ability to do that themselves. So I just think that giving developers the tools again to actually affect the game is as important as giving players the tools to affect the game, right? Because if a player feels like he can't affect the game, then he feels like, well, shit just kind of happens and it's super linear, right? But if a developer can affect the game, then how do you deal with balancing issues, especially PvP-related balancing issues? One issue is you have so many hours and so many testers. When hundreds of players jump in on it, they will find all the holes and cracks that you forgot. Oh yeah, because you as a person or as a developer are limited by how much you get paid and how many hours you work. Players like us, when we play an MMO, we can go 16 hours straight. My record in SWTOR, I told you guys, being I think maybe top 10 max level character on my server, I did 36 hours straight. I can't do that shit anymore. I'm a kid and I don't have the fortitude to be able to do that. But my point being is like, is there a developer that can compete with that? No. They work. They have a job. They have lives otherwise. Me, at the time, I had no life. I could just play the game all day. Of course I'm going to find the exploits. Of course I'm going to find the way to make it super easy for me. Because I'm playing way more than you're playing and you designed the game. I just don't know how you balance a lot of MMO PvP. At the end of the day, it just feels like Zerging is the end-all be-all approach. Friendly fire kills Zerging. So does siege weapons and crowd control. Crowd control, siege weapons, and friendly fire. Because those are the three things that kill Zergs in real life. So like, a lot of my ideas, guys, it's not like I just have this like, under this fedora is just like all this like brain just like coming up with all these ideas. Actually what I do is I just look at the real world and I think, okay, the real world has problems of Zerging, so how have they dealt with it in the past? How have battles been won when one side was greatly outnumbered? Well, technology, the fact that you can kill your own people with guns and weaponry, right? The fact that you have like siege weaponry, right? And if people all bunch up together, they explode easier, you know? Like so there's like, in the real world, that's where our solutions are for a lot of MMOs. And that's why I think, and I say it a lot, if MMOs can get out of being so gamified, I actually think it makes it easier to design. And my reasoning for that is, when you're gamifying something, which is making it less like a world, right, and more like a game, I think it becomes harder to know what the solutions are. Because if you keep it like a world, you can actually look at the real world as an example, right? Because you can think, okay, how do we deal with criminals in the real world? Well, you guys know that already. I don't have to explain that. How do we deal with big, massive Zergs? Well, we have things that deal with that, right? How do we deal with PvP being the only thing to do? The real world doesn't have that problem. You see my problem, or you see my point here? The point is like, if you just look at the real world and use it to compare to MMOs, a lot of the time you can figure out what the solutions are, right? The power of anonymity. Want someone to show their true colors? Give them a world where they can do anything with no real consequence. Are you ever going to make a video about... So what are these little things I'm seeing pop up? Are these you guys like cheering or something? It says redeemed, highlight my message. I'm not sure what that... Is that something new? I've never seen that before. But Based Praetorian asked, are you ever going to make a video about the Shroud of the Avatar? Of course, man. I'll make a video on Shroud of the Avatar. In fact, I'm looking forward to making that one. That one might even be made this year, because Portalarium is on the ropes already. I mean, they have been for a while, but... The sad part is Dark Souls technically has ways to make the game easier, built right into the foundation. But then you have to learn the game. Twitter and Reddit threads by people who won't play your game. Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, that's a good way to look at it, man. It's like, how many times do you guys read a thread where it's like, man, PvP games, blah, 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 like, someone's just like shitting on PvP games, and you're like, wait a minute. Do you like PvP games? No. How the fuck do you care? Go play another game. Why do you care what other people are, like, do I go to Path of Exile forums and Reddit and be like, I wish this game had more PvP, and I wish it had full loot, and I wish it... I want to do that internally. Like, I want the game to be like that, but that's just my own, like, desire. The game's not like that, and never has been like that, and clearly is not meant to be like that. So it's like, I don't feel the need to go and tell Path of Exile players or the developers, make your game like the game I want. It's not even the game, their game isn't the game I want, right? It's not my audience, or I'm not their target audience. Make rewards limited and people won't Zerg if it costs more to Zerg. Don't go far. Anthem, amazing sales and so few people are playing at the moment. High revenue doesn't necessarily equal high profit. And Ulysses is right. And that's kind of the point I was making earlier with NCSoft is like, just the fact that a company makes money sometimes isn't enough, right? They want to make a certain amount of money. They want a higher ROI. You mean corporations aren't out here for our best interests? Yeah, nope. You can't realistically appeal to everybody. Sheeps want to chew grass all day, and wolves want to chew bones all day. I mean, honestly, I feel like that's a really good way to put it. And that's why I think that there needs to be more content for sheeps to do. Because I want to do that content as well. But there should also be content for the people, like in Galaxies, who don't want to fight. And that's why I think we like the entertainer, the doctor, and the different roles within Galaxies, where it wasn't about being a combatant. You can still help. You can still provide. You're still a very valuable member of the community. But you just don't fight yourself. Good old nerd being a half an hour behind chat. Hey, there was a lot of chat, man. You're right. Problem of PvP games is that you need a very active balancing team. I think so too. I think that's why Guild Wars 1 had such a good PvP system, man. Our developers in Guild Wars 1 were like always on. I swear they were playing the game all the time too, because it just felt like they were always reacting to what the meta was. Scrolling down here. PlanetSide 2 had friendly fire and siege level weapons and crowd control, and it didn't stop the Zerg. Does PlanetSide have full friendly fire though? Because in PlanetSide, can't you just like instant respawn with basically no consequence? I think that's more of the problem than Zerging. The problem is there's like no consequence to doing anything. And there's also no point in capturing really anything. Because like after a certain while, why are you capturing it if it's just going to revolving door? You know, Global Agenda had the same problem. I think the fact that the world is constant makes devs hesitant to do patches. One misstep and you can tank the entire game's economy. People get really salty about friendly fire. Also, logistics really hurt Zerging. I think so too. Logistics definitely can hurt Zerging. Like, for example, if you had to worry about taking your entire Zerg army across like some hostile territory, that'd be a part of logistics you'd have to take into consideration. And Darkfall did a really good job of that. Darkfall had a really big map, which was both its like one of its best parts and one of its worst parts, because when it had population, it was great. When it didn't have population, it was horrible. But the great thing about it is you could have a Zerg just running through a different territory. And if you were like lagging by, if you were like maybe a couple of guys who were like catching up with the group, that's what my guild specialized in. Like my guild in Darkfall, our number one thing was what we called scroaching, which is basically just running around with next to no gear, like as cheap gear as we can possibly find, and trying to get as much gear as we can possibly find. So the way it would work is you would go out with basically like shit gear, and then hope to kill somebody with good gear, take his gear, and then you would keep upgrading until you get better gear. And sometimes you'd come back with way more than you had before, so which means you had a big net positive, right? But what we did specifically is we would find whenever certain guilds were going to have sieges. We'd show up to the sieges, but we wouldn't pick a side, right? We'd pick no side. We'd pick the side of loot, as I would always say. We would pick the side of loot. And how we would pick the side of loot is wait around, watch people die, take their shit. Show up, dude dies, grab his shit, run away. See a couple of people lagging around, maybe they came late to the battle, take them out really quickly, take their shit. That was kind of what my guild did a lot of the time in Darkfall, is we didn't have enough members to go against the Zerg head on, so we never did. We never tried to. We always ran away, which Zergs can't catch up to us, right? Because they have way more people to move. We're small, so we can be mobile easily, right? And that was always a big thing, was this using our small numbers as an advantage. So for example, there's been times in Darkfall, because there's friendly fire, where I just told my group to just straight out engage. Even though we were like greatly outnumbered, like we're talking 5 against like 25, you know, numbers like that. And we'd actually have come away with victories before. And the simple reasoning, I think, for that is, sure, we had good players. I think it more has to do with the fact that when you choose to charge a group of superior numbers and there's friendly fire, and you don't just die immediately, like in real life, right? If you were to get hit once by a sword, you just die. It's an MMO, you don't die immediately. So if you know how to play, you can kind of survive. When you run into a big group, dude, you just see everyone start running like chickens with their heads cut off. It's one of the funniest things you will ever experience, and that's why I really hope you guys someday can experience an MMO with friendly fire, because you guys will laugh. It so quickly will show the good from the bad players, because you see big groups happen, and all of a sudden, like, one side has lost like a quarter of their numbers already before the battle's barely even started, and you're like, huh? And it's because they're like nuking their own teammates or killing their own teammates. So very oftentimes you could look at the kill logs and see other people getting death blows on their own teammates. And so that was a big part of the game, was when you saw that they had enough numbers that you weren't going to really run away, right? Like, let's say they had a gain on you. Maybe they had a good angle on you. You had to make the decision, all right, are we just going to die, try to run and die, or just like go in and try and make shit happen? And of course, since it's a game about PvP and it's about having fun, we just say, screw it, just go in. And sometimes it would work. Sometimes we get completely stomped and destroyed. But that's part of the fun, I think, is you always knew that when you saw a big Zerg group, it wasn't just fear that you felt. It was also opportunity. You're like, these guys have good gear because they're so safe that they're working in a big group. But what happens when you spread that big group up? Or bring them all together and they start killing each other? Well, you get to loot. Oh, it's a new Twitch feature. You get points for spamming chat now. Gotcha. Oh god, now you guys are gonna spam it all the time. I'm mad curious to see what you do, considering you spoke to Lord British already. Yeah, I don't have a lot positive to say about Richard Garriott, to be honest. The way that his career has sort of ended up for me has been kind of like, it's one of those things where it's like you feel like a lot of the goodwill over the guy's name has been exhausted at this point. And it's like, do I just not be critical of him because he's a legend and coined the term MMORPG, right? Or is it fair to be critical against everybody equally? That's what I believe. I believe it's fair to be critical against everyone equally, if they warrant it. And in the case of Richard Garriott, I mean, you've been following the story of Portalarium and Shroud of the Avatar. I mean, it looks like it's kind of been poorly managed, right? To say the least. You can't cheese Dark Souls unless you know the game. You can't get Crystal Soul Spears unless you know Big Hat Logan is caged behind a wall that you need to demolish with a cannonball. I would have never figured that out. It's not quite that simple. Some things have a certain wasted potential that's more about personal preference. You'll have to explain what you mean, because I'm not really entirely sure what you're trying to say. Not only is there no consequence to dying in Planetside, the consequence for a TK is a slap on the wrist. They did destroy that with teleport runes. AI bags. That's a good point, man. That was like teleport runes ruined the game because they basically made it to where now you had this big ass empty map that nobody traversed around anymore. And because the economy in Darkfall was so just non-existent, I'm sorry, most of the time, it also made it to where there was no like geographical reasons to be in certain regions of the map. So you had entire areas of Darkfall that were just abandoned. They tried to fix this with New World, but just never did. Sounds like Rust. In that game, we call it snowballing. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, sorry, beheaded chickens aren't funny, but they are delicious. You don't need to type in chat to get points, you get them by just being in the stream. And you get a bonus from time to time if you click a pop-up that appears. So it's like a QuickTime event. LB has been running off the success of UO for like 30 years now. Yeah, definitely. Lord British is washed up. Nothing good since UO. Washed up. My mouth is getting dry. All right, let's jump into some of my other topics I wanted to get to. For example, the one that we haven't got to, and this is the last one I'll get to, and then we'll open up the MMO roundtable. So currently, right now, I've got Maghorn and BlackRuins sitting in the lobby, so they'd like to engage in the next discussion. I'm not sure if Card is joining us today. He might be taking us, taking a, I guess, a rest on the bench. But we'll see. All right, the last thing I want to get to before we get to that point, though, since we've had quite the rants already, right, is Camelot Unchained has made the announcement of an announcement to come. Now, I know that's not that exciting, and it certainly is more exciting than just an announcement of an announcement. It's an announcement of an announcement that is, as Mark Jacobs said, a massive immersive experience that is unlike anything we have shown you to date. It is going to be a fun experience, not a tech demo. Okay. So that certainly is a lot more than just an announcement of another announcement. It's an announcement of another announcement that's supposed to be an immersive experience that's not a tech demo. So I'm eager to see what they have in store. Obviously, I am a closed beta tester of Camelot Unchained. I'm under NDA, so I can't talk about the current state of the game. I can say that they've clearly managed to have whatever number they wanted to reach in terms of population, they've been eclipsing that, right? They've been able to have over 1,000 players in their zone concurrently and still have relatively good performance. So the criticism against Camelot Unchained has been more so that it's been under kind of lock and key, right? You're not getting a whole lot of information unless you're testing it yourself. But also that a lot of what they show publicly is just kind of like dev chats, newsletters, and a lot of non-visual stuff. Like, sure, they have screenshots and they'll show off concept art. But what I'm trying to say is that actual gameplay and actual footage of the gameplay in Camelot Unchained is not really, there's not a whole lot of gameplay content out there. There's not a whole lot of footage, I should say. And so if this is going to be more of that, or at least showing off more of what the experience is supposed to be like in the game, right? When it's more like a MMO versus a test, I'm excited about that. I don't really have anything else to add, just because, I mean, what else is there to add other than just us making assumptions about what's going to happen? We will show you what you've never seen before, which can be literally anything because we haven't shown you anything yet. Yeah, exactly. Like you guys know I'm a big Camelot Unchained fan, just because I believe in their vision. But I'm the first to tell you that they've got a lot of people to impress. And what I mean by that is I was reading this on Reddit, and a lot of the comments I think are very fair. They're like, look, when it comes to Camelot Unchained, I don't even read the shit they say anymore. And their reasoning for that was basically like, they say a lot of stuff. They send us like words and walls of text, but we're not actually like getting the substance in the actual gameplay. And I think that's a very fair criticism. So hopefully they're going to right that wrong. See you later, Vila. All right. Got through that and my voice is still alive. So let's go ahead and join the podcast lobby and see what BlackRuins and Maghorn have to say about this week's MMO Roundtable. Hey, what's up, guys? All right, I had to put you guys on the speaker. Say hello again.
Hello.
Hello?
Okay, cool. It worked. All right, so I'll start off with the question, and then you guys can go, and then I'll go last. The question for the week for the MMO roundtable discussion, which is a discussion, essentially like an open floor discussion for those who have the appropriate rank, which means you have to be active on Discord and also post in discussions already. It's kind of like quality control in a sense, but the MMO roundtable is a weekly council meeting of passionate but diverse MMO fans where we tackle a weekly subject for discussion and hopefully have enough perspectives to either disagree or at least create more discussion around a topic than otherwise we would have if we just all agree about the same shit. So it's not that we try and disagree, it's just more that it's nice to have different perspectives, because if we all agree, then it's just kind of boring. So this week's topic is what is your opinion of server types in MMOs? Do you like or dislike having different server types? For example, like PvE, PvP, or RP servers, if you're using WoW as an example. Or do you prefer a mega server with just one rule set over the specific rule set servers? And a mega server is essentially just one large server where all people who play the game share that server. And it technically isn't that, because there's like instances within that. But anyway, just point being, everyone's playing the same server. So I'll start off with whoever wants to go first.
I'll go first. So I prefer mega servers because I feel like you get a lot more varied type of interactions from a mega server compared to RP or PP or PvE servers. However, that's assuming if the devs have systems and mechanics in place that allow all of the communities to interact with each other without being destructive. Like PvP is just flat out just destroying the PvEs in any sort of PvP match, and the RPs not being able to RP or something breaking RP with people being able to bring in things that are not really fitting the lore of the game. That's my piece.
I actually prefer the different server types because I think that it allows players to have the experience they want at all times while they're in the server. Whereas a mega server requires the devs to section off different regions of the world in order for people to do what they want, and it actually divides players up even more. So in the long run, it seems like the mega server would actually be worse for player interaction.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear two different sides to it, because honestly, on this myself, I'm kind of in the middle. I think I can see the merit of both sides, and I'm not trying to have the both sides argument here, but don't ever let me get away with that. But I can see the merit of both sides, and I'll start with having server types. If you're playing a theme park game, I think you almost have to have server types, because if you don't, it just seems like sort of like what Maghorn was saying, like if your point of your game, which I'm assuming if you have a theme park MMO, that is the point of your game, is to give someone a very specific kind of experience, right? You're tailoring an experience for them. If you have a mega server and there's no rule set on it, like what if somebody wants a different version of that and they want one that has PvP enabled? Or maybe one wants one where they have roleplay naming policies, or one wants one where it's just PvE, where there's no PvP at all. It doesn't seem out of the question to have the different server types to satisfy those different needs. What I will say, though, is that maybe part of it is just my sandbox perspective, that I don't like the idea of having split servers if you have a sandbox game, of course, because ultimately I see it as like, unless you're going to do a sandbox server type where you actually let me change the server, like a shard in Ultima Online, or like Crowfall's trying to do with their lobby system of sorts, unless you give me that ability to change the actual rule set of my server, I don't really want a sandbox to have that ability. I guess if that makes sense. I think having the same experience is very important, and it's a big reason why I don't like hard or easy mode when it comes to raids or dungeon content, because I don't like any time you add things into a game where you're changing people's experiences, even though they're kind of doing the same thing. So like, I know it's a little bit different here, but I actually would add that I think it would be cool if we are going to have server types, like why not give us as the players the ability to change the server? And a good example of this is Legends of Aria, of course, did this recently, but the biggest example is Ultima Online, where you have private shards, and shards have different experience gains, different XP gains. Sorry, I already said that. Experience gains. The economy is different. They might have different features. They might be based on a different patch. They might have new features that maybe other servers don't even have. Like some shards have unique content that live servers don't have, that other shard servers don't have. So having the ability to customize a server and its rule set, to me, is an awesome idea. But if you're not going to give me the ability and you're just telling me to choose between PvE, PvP, and roleplay, I think my problem always ends up where look at WoW, for example. I joined the Grobulus server, which is an RP PvP server, and largely my server is one of the most balanced servers. Like if you look at the breakdown between Alliance and Horde, we have one of the most balanced servers. But then there's PvP servers that are so imbalanced, it's like 80-20, 90-10. And so that's when I start to get worried about a PvP server, for example, is like, what do you do when your server is based on a PvP rule set and you have great imbalances? And your game is a theme park game, so it's not like these are going to fix themselves.
Well, that issue is actually isolated to classic WoW. If you play in the modern game, then that sort of issue is sort of annihilated because the different server types will cross over as if they are a mega server.
I would say that's a problem with the foundation of the game, because that's just faction games. If you have a faction game, then it's very easy to just have one side just dominating the other. That's why I always like having games that are more guild run and have a lot of different guilds fighting each other than just 2 sides or 3 sides like PlanetSide 2.
That is an interesting point, though, Maghorn. Someone else in chat said it as well. Retail WoW is technically a mega server at this point.
Yes, but it's like 3 different types of mega servers because they each have their own rule sets. They just happen to cross over.
It's I can't help but think the next crop of these soon to launch TM Kickstarter MMOs, most of them are probably going to go the way of a mega server, it looks like. But I think the most interesting out of those is certainly Crowfall, and Crowfall's approach of allowing you to actually customize a certain server. I guess, what are your opinions of that, both of you?
Well, I'll go first. I think that's pretty good, because then you have some servers might appeal. It's almost like having, like, not mega. It's almost like having different types of servers like RP, PvE, but just more tailored to Crowfall, because you have some servers which might be like, people might like this server more than the others. And I've seen this. Also, want to add this observation I made. When you have mega servers, like when I saw people praying for Arcades Unchained, there were certain servers where all the PvPs will go to that certain server, all the guilds will go to that server, so they can pretty much, flex on other guilds to make them feel like they're the biggest guilds and be really competitive, while other servers might be more PvE oriented. I'm not saying that this is like a split server system, but it is kind of like an observation I made.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of having some customization over a server, because instead of just having like 3 server types, you could theoretically have way more variety. And so I feel like I guess it can be harder in the perspective of, yeah, you have to worry about players running your servers and how does that work exactly. But I mean, you don't have to have players run the servers themselves, because as you guys know from playing dedicated servers, services exist, and they're not out of the question to have worked with a developer. They've done this already, where you could just rent a dedicated server, then you'd have a dedicated server that would give you the ability to change the rule set over it. And I can't help but feel like that might be one of the more uncharted territories yet. Like, because I think that obviously it's been done before and it's been done for a long time, but only on a smaller scale. Like you've never really seen it done at a larger scale besides in games that aren't MMOs, basically. And I'm wondering, like, survival games actually are a great example, right? Like, survival games have such a variety between the servers. And I know that can be problematic in some ways because it's like when you're a new player, it's hard to know which one to join. Like, when you go and look at a server lobby list and you're like, man, what does this mean? What does this mean? There's so many different server types, it's almost overwhelming. But then the cool thing is as you guys are probably aware of as well in games like Rust, there's still official servers too. So I wonder if that'll be kind of something that developers look towards doing, is having official servers, maybe PvP, PvE, RP, but then also giving players the ability to run their own servers. I also feel like maybe they don't want to deal with management, right? Having to manage such a thing does seem like it could be annoying, but it's also, you could leave that up to the players, man. If anything, it's like, hey, rent our server. If your server needs admins, man, you're your own admins. Figure it out on your own. It's a smart way to get rid of having to manage as much hands-on.
Yeah, and if the private servers happen to have really good GMs that can enhance everybody's experience, even better.
Yeah, exactly. And that has already happened before. So, I mean, I'm sure that, again, there's developer-wise, I can't make the argument because I'm not a developer who has a game that doesn't want to open up the server system or the server rule set, so I don't know why you wouldn't want that, but I'd like to talk to a developer and hear from their perspective why you wouldn't want that. What would be the biggest problems from such? Because, yeah, management and collusion and things like that can be problematic and certainly have probably existed in many different private servers. Like, I think of WoW private servers where you could donate and you'd get like rare gear and stuff like that. Like, I can see where it's problematic for some people because they think, oh, there's not going to be a whole lot of regulation, but that's also up to the players to decide. Because if you choose a server and it has good admins, you choose a server because it has good admins, it's probably not going to have that problem as much. But if you choose a server where you don't know the admin, he's never on, he's never active, and again, for people who play survival games, you've experienced this before, you know it's going to be pretty hard to deal with that hacker at 1 a.m., right? Like, the hacker at 1 a.m. is going to be smashing everybody, and no one's going to ban him because there's no admin on. So I think, obviously, I see the problems that come from opening up the server rule sets, but I like the idea of giving players the ability to change that because I think it gives your game a lot more longevity in the end. And not to mention, you can still have people paying a sub fee, right? Even if they're not playing the live version of the game. Or you can still have people buying your game and you can still make money off of it, even when they're not necessarily playing your particular tailored content.
I think that the reason why a lot of MMOs don't put the GM tools in the hands of the players is because of that lack of dedicated administration. If you don't have someone online at all times who can handle, problems that the players are having, and you're in a private server, then when their problem doesn't come up, the people on that server won't necessarily complain to the owners of the server. They'll complain to the developers, and the developers can't do anything about it because it's not their server anymore. So it's kind of like a liability thing that keeps the bigger groups away from that.
Pin Zero in chat mentioned that Ragnarok had a fan-made site called Rate My Server, which was a massive database for the game on top of being a go-to site for looking at private servers. Yeah, so that's when the players really have to fill that void, so to say. And I think that at that point, it's just like it's a philosophical decision, from like a developmental perspective. Is like, how much do you want to be hands-on yourself versus giving people the opportunity to play it and change aspects of the game themselves. And obviously, from a publisher standpoint, it's pretty easy to understand why you wouldn't want that. I think Gardner is partly joking, but I can see the truth in it. He says, "Easy problem is you may find out that your players are running the game better than you."
One thing I will say about specific rule set type servers is that I feel like I think it would be harder. I could be wrong though. I think it could be harder for developers to make content that will satisfy like all the different types of player bases than if you just had a mega servers where everybody's on the same page, possibly. And also, if you have a small developer team, the developers might end up prioritizing one group of players than others. and make feel other group of players like they've been left out.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think I've seen that in Rust, because Rust added PVE and other aspects later on to it, where you had like murderers that run around and can fight and stuff, and it obviously was added as a means to adding more to the game than just fighting, but for the good portion, as you said, of private servers, or rather the public servers who don't give a shit about PVE, kind of just like, oh, you guys aren't making this content for us. I can definitely see that as being problematic. Maybe that's why it's something that applies only to a game that's more either contained, like in Crowfall's case, like it's more closer to a survival game and gives you more tools to affect the way the game plays, I guess, versus like what you said. Because I agree, like if personally, I would make a mega server. If I made an MMO, I would make a mega server, and my reasoning for that is just simply because I want story to be a big part of my game, and story coming from the world itself. And it seems like it's kind of difficult to have, let's say 3, 4, 5 different servers and have these different experiences on those servers. I feel like I don't know, maybe actually I take that back. I think it'd be kind of cool just from like a observational perspective to see how the 3 different servers would handle such an event. That's maybe the same event, but they end up handling it different because the people on the servers are different. But I think that if you're trying to give a certain experience, it might just be easier to put it all into one server and then be like, oh, the city was wiped out here. And that's just it. It's not, the city's wiped out here, and then this server did it this way, this server did it this way, and this server did it this way.
Yeah, we have to be a little bit careful using Rust as an example because 99% of the time they are very hands off, even on the official servers. So I think it would be better to focus his argument on more established MMOs like Star Wars: The Old Republic and games like that, where they do develop content in a balanced manner for all of their different servers because they do big releases that are targeted to everybody. And it's, I'm having a really hard time putting this into words. I really don't know how to put this. Hmm.
It's okay. It happens. I mean, it happens to me mid-sentence. So I just pretend I'm reading comments or reading the chat. I'm just kidding. I'm trying to
I
think where
don't
else we
think
can go with it
that
too. If you guys have any
I
other ideas, let me know.
I don't think that for most games there's an issue with balancing out content generation that's targeted to PvP or roleplay or PvE type players. It's just they make all the content at once and then just push it out as needed or whenever it's ready.
Yeah, I guess if it's content less from a linear perspective, that makes sense because let's say you're just adding a new feature. The new feature could be fishing. Well, fishing could apply to all of those audiences. But if it's like a story raid, then obviously the story raid is only going to appeal to people who want to do a story raid. I don't know. I guess we'll see, but I'll say certainly to maybe put a bow on it. The current situation of how servers are handled, I think, is done with not a whole lot of thought in terms of why they're doing it. If that makes sense. It's more of kind of like we're just doing the same thing we've already been doing because it works pretty well. Like the mega server thing that Maghorn mentioned. Other games are doing that as well, and it makes sense why they're doing it, right? Because you don't have to worry about a server being so unpopulated you have to have server transfers. That's a big part of it, sure, but I think that I'll let you go ahead. BlackRuins, you got something to say?
Yeah, I just want to say, like, why can't mega servers have specific rule type servers? Like, for example, just having different zones in the map that have different rule set where players can organize and will go to those certain areas that they like.
Well, they do have that, like in Black Desert Online, and I think Elder Scrolls Online does this,
Yeah.
where there will be different sections that are dedicated to specific types of play. My problem with that is that it divides up the player base, so everybody is just kind of crammed into specific regions of the map rather than fully exploring everything.
I guess it depends how they balance it.
Yeah, I feel like it always comes back to that in some way too, because like
Yeah.
the MMO industry is interesting because it's like good ideas don't mean it's gonna work. I feel like more than any other genre of game, you can take a good idea and someone could just turn it into a completely horrible idea. Like you can say, "Oh, let's give new players the ability to not be attacked by other players," and then all of a sudden the new players find a way to like attack other players while they can't be attacked. Like it's always like you can have these good ideas, but then whenever you actually put it into practice, it's like, how is it actually going to happen? How are the players gonna handle it?
Well, that sort of thing just comes down to, actually testing out what you're implementing before you put it in.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's just because, like, when it comes to servers, to be specific, if it's just like servers are already a big problem. They're already a big focus, if that makes sense, of developers. Are a big focus of developers from the perspective of if your game can't run properly, it's not going to function. So they have to work on having servers that work and are probably cheap and efficient enough to where they're not breaking their bank. So maybe they're not really thinking about it as like, oh, there's innovation there. They're just thinking like, oh, let's cut the cost. Let's like save some money here. Let's make this easier on us. Let's have this like, so we don't have to worry about server transfers. But if you make a game, I think as an indie company, I think it's very unlikely you do multiple server types just in terms of resources. It seems like it'd be easier to just focus on one server. That way you can just build the game around that. So maybe multiple server types only really applies to games that are particularly unique in aspects, like games that are more like survival games like Crowfall, or games that are more instanced and linear like WoW, right?
I'm looking at some of the things that Rippies was saying about how there might not be enough resources in mega servers. One of the disadvantages of mega servers, how there might not be enough resources and might be detrimental to new player experience. I don't know if that's necessarily true, because I feel like once again that comes to balance of the game and how the game, what option it gives new players to do at the start of the game, and how they can catch them up to players who've been playing for a while.
It certainly complicates things when you have a new player joining a year later, right? But I think honestly, sandbox games with mega servers have always had that problem. And that's also just, I mean, frankly speaking, it's also a problem in real life, right? I mean, is it fair that you're born to a certain parent over another parent, right? Is it fair that you're born poor or born rich, right? It's not really fair, but I guess it's easier for people to make arguments about fairness in a game because, you want it to just be fun. You don't want there to be necessarily consequences or things that you're missing out on. But that's just going to happen. Like, if you have, for example, player housing that's out in the world, eventually that's not going to be enough room, right? Unless you keep expanding territory or adding more worlds or more zones to your game, like you're going to have a problem of finite resources. And I actually think, personally speaking, that's probably the most important part of conflict, is having finite resources. So if you have a scarcity of resources, then people are going to be fighting over those resources because, well, they have to, right?
Yeah, I think if you have systems in place that allow conflict to happen, so that if a house breaks, that new players can actually snatch up the new land, take it from the old players. I think that's great.
Yeah, and I think that's why, like, obviously things like tax systems exist, things like territory control or territory, taking control of territory from other people, like war, are important in games like that, because otherwise it has happened in games. Like, I remember originally in Star Wars Galaxies, you had so many plots of land that were just like empty. Meaning empty people, but they had big buildings and big, guild halls and houses, but they were just, nobody was there. You couldn't go inside the building, so it was closed, and because they didn't pay their taxes. but it hadn't been claimed yet. And so I always thought like they were halfway there with having a tax system, but they should have just made that shit pack your shit up. And I feel like they didn't want to do that because it's controversial. But if you're gonna have a system like that where player housing could be obtained out in the world and other people can see and experience it as well, then I think it's important that you can also lose it. And that's a hard thing to talk about, I think, because of course, who wants to buy a house, work to get a house, and then lose it? Nobody really wants to do that. But it's not a matter of if you want to, it's a matter of the game has to have consequences. Otherwise, what's the point? Like, if there's no consequences and there's no reason to fight over things, then the game better be fun otherwise.
Yeah, and I think if you have a lot of conflict, it makes it if it requires a lot of effort to get a player housing, it just makes it feel a lot more exciting or happy when you finally get a house.
Yeah, just like it would, like I just moved into an apartment last month myself, and like if it wasn't challenging to get this place, would I have liked it nearly as much? Like, potentially, right? Roof over my head, it's always a good thing, but the fact that it's hard to get in a way also does increase your enjoyment, right? Because you know that, oh, I had to go through all of this X, Y, and Z in order to get that property. Oh, that's interesting. So WildStar apparently had a system where if you stopped making payments, you'd lose it to the open world, but you would have it instanced. I think that's a great idea. All right, I don't have anything else to add here, and that was probably one of our shorter ones. So I'll try and think of a longer one for next week. Maybe next week we'd have Limpos join us too, so he can add some bias into the mix, spice things up.
I think it was quite similar to the last question, and I already said a lot of stuff about the last question.
Yeah, and for me, I saw it as like an extension from that. So it's certainly, I probably could have added another question on top of it, but I think it's hard to have the discussion when it all comes down to depends. It's like it's hard to have a discussion when you're just like, well, it depends, because anyone can say, well, it depends. That doesn't make for a good discussion, right? So we have to kind of like dig into things and speculate and be like, but what if it was like this? But what if it was like that? So I think it'll be exciting to watch Crowfall unfold just because of that. Like I'm eager to see how a game that's, maybe one of the highest profile games at the moment in the MMO industry, that's essentially doing it differently. They're not going for the typical approach. They're giving players immediately the ability and the access to change the rules of their game. And so I think if they have success from that, I bet you're going to see a lot more of it.
Yeah. I think one level above Crowfall will probably be Hytale with all of its customizability.
Oh yeah, Hytale is one that I can't wait to test, because even the developers themselves have kind of recently they had that article that came out where they were like, wow, we kind of realized our game's bigger than even we thought it was. and I think that honestly with Hytale, and obviously Minecraft has done that for a number of years now, Hytale is going to be, and I'll end it on that because I feel like we always end up talking about Hytale, BlackRuins, but Hytale is going to be a shock, I think, to the industry. I think that's going to wake people up and realize we've been playing shit games that just call themselves MMOs for such a long time. Now you can actually have a good game that qualifies as an MMO just by not happen chance or like randomly, but because people essentially opened up like the player count. That's all that needed to happen. For example, Hytale's built around the idea of creating a world, right? And being able to create everything in the world. And so the fact that it only has, let's say, top 100 players, 200 players, we don't know yet how many players it's supposed to have just on its base server. That maybe keeps it from being an MMO, but all it has to do is give you the ability to change the rules, jack the player count up, and next thing you know, you have an MMO. And to me, that's like very unique. You just don't see that.
Yeah, I saw it to an extent in Minecraft, but that was Minecraft was quite limiting, especially with player size. There would definitely cool to see with Hytale with all of its customizability and hopefully be able to ramp up the players a lot higher than Minecraft did.
I think it'll open up the avenue for more hobby developers, more fans like ourselves, to maybe take ideas that we've had in the past and see if they work. So if anything, Hytale and games like that make for perfect test environments to see what happens if you add a plague into your game, for example, or what happens if you add a monster who just attacks everybody's land. You could do all of those things, and I feel like the fact that it's more modular based, if that makes sense, makes it so much easier to customize. And that, I think, is going to be maybe, I'm throwing it out there, I think that's going to be the big innovation to come in the next couple of years, is going to be more abilities and more ways to affect the server and therefore affect the game.
Create your own game from a game, really.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you could take a game, maybe Hytale on its own right, that's a great game. Let's say like you like the game, Minecraft, if you want to use that as an example. Let's say you just like the base game. But then you also have so much more to do with it. Maybe you want an MMO that's full loot, so you join a Hytale server that's full loot. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you want one that's roleplay focused, where it's hard roleplay. Everybody's roleplaying in character. The sheer amount of like options you'll have is gonna make MMOs by design look just outdated as hell.
Yes, it will be very interesting to see in 2021. And also, I feel like a lot of maybe Kickstarter MMOs might come out in 2021, maybe even Star Citizen, so you'll have a lot of competition.
Oh, I definitely think 2021 is gonna be the more interesting year. I'm sorry to say it, guys. I don't think 2020 is the year yet. I think this is a year of more announcements of announcements and more announcements of alphas and that stuff. And I'm not saying that's not also exciting or can't be also exciting, but I don't know. Something about this year for me yet, just call it my Spidey sense. It just doesn't feel like it's going to be the big year for MMOs. I think it's next year for sure.
I think 2019 was a low point, and now we're just slowly climbing back up, maybe.
Hopefully. Well, I'd like to thank both of you for stopping by and joining me today, BlackRuins and Maghorn. Next week, we're going to have a very juicy discussion, so I'll find a way to make people choose a side, and then we'll have to defend it to our last dying breath. No, I'm just kidding, but we'll have Limpos here probably as well to throw in his bias man approach, and I'm thinking of getting more theoretical. So I would say I'm thinking of doing more theoretical situations where we can come up with actual ideas, sort of like we've done before. And an idea I have is taking existing games, and then we could brainstorm as a group, as a roundtable, how could you fix that game? Quote unquote, fix that game. I think those are really fun to do because you have a game that already exists. You have something to look at. You know kind of what the reference point is. And then you could say, how would you fix it? You know, what would you add to it to fix the game, change it? I think doing more theoretical things like that will certainly introduce the amount of discussion and back and forth we have. The reason why I haven't done them before is, man, I love having theoretical discussions, but boy, did I have way too many of those on forums most of my life. After a while, you're just like, I'm tired of making all these hypotheticals. I only want to talk about shit that's actually going to happen. But I'm working on that. All right, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for joining me today.
No problem.
See you, nerd.
All right, thanks to BlackRuins and Maghorn for joining us today. Shorter than usual, which is good because my voice is like dying today. I don't know if it's because I'm like I didn't drink enough water or what, but oh no, trust me. That's the thing is if we talk theory, man, it's just like theory just will turn a 2-hour podcast into a 4-hour podcast like nothing, right? Because next thing you know, you're just like, well, what if WoW Classic added this to it? Or what if Lord of the Rings Online did this? Or what if Vindictus did this? What if Black Desert Online did this, right? Like, hypotheticals are very fun and definitely make for good discussion. I've just kind of steered away from them before because I'm always like, I will have my slideshow ready next time. Yeah, I think coming up with modern solutions for old gaming problems is fun and enjoyable, and I think people enjoy that and join the Discord for theory crafting. Yeah, there's a lot more theory crafting in the Discord. Most of the theory crafting is happening in Discord, in fact, because it's just a better format for that, right? You can type out your opinion. You've got time to make your response. You don't have to respond right away. You're not on a podcast. You don't have to worry about crap. Everyone's listening to me. It's higher pressure, right? So yeah, there's definitely a lot more like theoretical discussions that happen on the Discord side of things. So that's www.discord.gg/nerdslayer. I want to just open up the floor, I guess, since I'm trying to get out of here now. Do you guys have any questions you'd like to ask me? You can ask me anything. The best way to get your questions answered are to ask them in chat, of course. Nowhere else. Go look around for them. So if you guys have any questions, now is the time to ask me. I will be closing up shop here in the next maybe like 14 minutes or so. So what's the next two Death of a games? So Battleborn obviously is the first to come. And then I will be doing you know what, I'll tell you guys, because there's only 30 of y'all here right now, and I always like to give you guys the scoops because y'all watch me. It's going to be Heroes of the Storm. So there you go. Battleborn and then Heroes of the Storm. What we're going for next. I've promised it already, but I said the next ones were going to be pretty big. Artifact has already been huge. I mean, like, the response for Artifact so far has been like immense. I mean, it broke like 100k views in just a couple of days and is all over the place. So like, I'm really glad with the success of Artifact, and it shows that, hey, when I actually cover games that are still relevant and not just like decades old and nobody played them, I get a lot more responses to them, and that allows me to actually continue to make my career out of this. So I've mentioned it before, but it's very difficult for me to make content and make new content and make more content when I have I have to pay attention to what I'm actually covering. So like, as a YouTuber now, since I do this full time, I get paid off of ad revenue primarily, right? I make most of my money as a person from ad revenue, which unfortunately means, if you guys like it or not, I'm very driven about how much views my product gets, right? So like, if my Death of a Game gets 30k views, that's a failure for me. If it gets 50k views, it's a failure for me. It's not very good for me. But if I can at least get 100k views, then that allows me to keep making more Death of a Games. So I have a good feeling, of course. Artifact did well, so I don't see how Battleborn nor Heroes of the Storm won't be just as massive, if not bigger. But we will see. He did. Sir Action Slacks did watch the Artifact video because he posted on my video. I remember that. When is the AC coming in for the full suit podcast? I actually wore the full suit last time, and the AC in here is working and works just fine. It's just more that I don't have enough suits. I need more suits to be. Since I did have a good month just prior, that month is going to allow me to pay for the rest of the art and assets of my new series, which is basically already done. Just needs to get polished up, maybe in a couple of the art assets, and also I need to pay the composer so I can actually own the rights to the song, right? Because that's what we do, we pay artists. And then after that, then I'll start looking at my wardrobe. So it's like, I want to do like a maybe a document. I'll do a Google Doc where I'll tell you guys what my priorities are in terms of like my resources, so I can let y'all know what I'm focusing my money on. Because since, again, I don't have a business loan, I don't have business credit, I don't have some like business credit line where I can just like charge whatever to it. I don't have that access, so everything comes from out of my own pocket. So I have to live, pay my own expenses, and then also find a way to still put money back into my channel and expand the content that I'm making. So I obviously can't wait for Term Travel, my next series to come out. That's run by Joshua, which I'm not going to name him yet because he has his own character name that he's coming up with himself. the intro is just kick ass. In fact, I wish I could show you guys it, but there's just, I can't have people recording it and things like that and putting it all over the place. You never know, since I don't own the copyright yet, or I don't own the song. I don't know what happened there. Maybe the composer would get mad at me if I show it. On top of that, I don't know if you know what? I can at least show you guys. I can't show you the music, but I could at least show you what it looks like, I think. So let me do that now. Let me see if I can find it, actually. I should at least be able to show you guys what one of the intro looks like, so I can at least give you guys a teaser. But I do want to make a document that basically just outlines, like, monetarily, what am I focusing my resources on, because as I said, right now it's finishing the rest of this series, and then after finishing that series, it's actually upgrading my podcast. So I want to get a couch here, put all my stuff up on this wall here, which is why you guys haven't seen me do anything back here. I'm not going to mess with anything until I can get it to where I want to have a camera pointing to this wall. And on this wall, it's going to have my little detective board and all of my sound stuff, and all of my posters and my sound foam. And then it'll just be a tripod here, the lights pointed this way. And I'll be sitting on a couch instead of on my chair on my computer using a shitty webcam. So that's like the next goal, is to kind of upgrade the podcast equipment, basically the camera, the adding like a particular studio space here, so I can, you know, have something to show you guys, so it's not just like this in the background, because this doesn't look very professional for a podcast, especially. Yeah, so that's probably like my next goal. And I need the camera anyway, because I wanted to start doing more vlog content, like content of me out in the world, more content of me going to conventions, the stuff that I've done already, but more of it. Yeah, that's kind of like the next thing after that. Excuse me. Keep it a nice surprise. Yeah, I think I'll do that. I'm going to keep it a surprise. I don't feel like looking for it. So, yeah, I'll just keep it a surprise for now. I think you guys will love it. I love it. And you guys love my current intro. So I think you'll love it. I think I might have had a knock at the door. I need to figure out who that is. What else did I... Oh, in real life PvP? Yeah, actually. I want to do a live stream of me at my gym, training and things like that. I think more of my personal kind of like vlog content will probably be on my stream, since I can keep my YouTube to more of my like produced content and just my podcast being uploaded there. That's the goal, at least. And then the vlog stuff will be kind of more of like, you know, the typical streamer backpack, that kind of stuff, where you can actually show people my gym, where I train, do jujitsu. Maybe I can show you guys whenever I plan on traveling to Japan, all of that stuff. There's a convention this month in San Antonio. It's PAX South. And, you know, show you guys footage of that. Just different ideas like that, basically. Trying to show off more of my personal life and more of my personality as well. Because although obviously I like making Death of a Game videos and videos of that nature, it's not the only kind of content that I'm interested in the rest of my life. And not to mention, it is not the kind of content that, you know, for all intents and purposes, attracts sponsors. Sponsors also like to see more of you as a person. They want to see more of your personality, and I'm working on doing that. It's just a process, like I said. So I'll try and come up with like a document that shows you guys like monetarily what I'm focusing on. You guys know it's planned, and it's not just me saying it's going to happen, because if it hasn't happened, it basically means I don't have the money. Like, so if something hasn't happened yet, it usually just means I don't have the money for it. It's no other big reasons for that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and head out, because looks like the questions have slowed down, and it's a good time for me to escape. Kidding. I love you guys. Good to see you guys again on Monday, the 6th of January, 2020, the first podcast of the new year. Here's to more Death of a Game videos, more streams, and just much more content. Thanks for watching as always. I will see you guys later.